That's what I do when I find an idea on the internet. I'll write it down. Hi, I'm Marta and this is NotEnoughTECH. Some time ago I've installed semi-smart motorized curtains, and if you're interested in that and how awesome they are to basically wake you up in the morning, you can click on that video there and see the curtains in action. Now, it would have been nice to actually do something more about curtains, because right now I have them running on a schedule. So on the weekdays I have 7:30 curtains opening up, and on the weekends they open up a little bit later, allowing, well, mainly my wife to sleep a little bit longer. Now, it would have been really nice to synchronize with alarm clock. Now, yes, you can actually set some policies with Google Assistant. It is possible to trigger routine, etc. But if you're working with a custom NodeRED server, that gets a little bit more difficult. So I figured I'm gonna connect this, which is just a plain Google alarm clock you can download with NodeRED server. So let's see it in action. This is the dashboard from NodeRED, and as you can see, this is set up actually for 2 phones. You'll be able to use unlimited devices and unlimited alarms. So let's get started. Now I'm going to only show you how it works with my Xiaomi Mi 9, and for this setup I've used the default Google Clock app. Now this will work with other alarm clocks and voice commands as well, but bear in mind you might want to check back with Tasker and have a look at the logcat itself to intercept slightly different messages. So let's start adding alarms. So let's add the first alarm. That's like 8 o'clock, and you can see after a moment it appears in here. There is a date, there is a time, a label, character count, and the status is true because it's set, and so on. Now we can obviously modify this. So for example, let's start with adding some repeat modes. So I've added a couple of days and the changes are quite instant, as you can see. We can also add the label. So I'm gonna add 5 characters, and unfortunately, because the label isn't exposed, I can only count how many letters it has. It will help you to identify some of the alarms if you use that as your key. Now let's add another timer. So let's get another alarm, something in here. So this is alarm for tomorrow. You can see the date has changed. Let's add another one. That's great. And we have 2 the same alarms. So let's delete one of them because it's not needed. And I'm going to delete, let's show you that I can direct which alarm I can delete. So in this case, I want to delete alarm number 3 with all the repeated options. So let's delete alarm 3 with all the repeated options. And if you no longer want an alarm, you can just simply dismiss them. Before we're going to jump into the tutorial, let's talk more about how it works. Now, initially I wanted to use Tasker test alarm action because that would be the most obvious thing to do. Unfortunately, not only I would be able to query one alarm, but that alarm would often come from a different source. So I would get an alarm from a clock, you would get an alarm from calendar, and so on. Since this method wasn't reliable, I needed to opt out for something else. Now, Tasker 5.9 comes with a logcat, and you can use the logcat as a trigger. Now, what is logcat? It's the system-wide message or log that you can actually access to via Tasker and see what your Android system is doing right now. Let me show you how I queried the alarm clock. Go to Event, search for logcat. Now you're gonna get a couple of notifications on here to confirm that you know how to use it. Use the magnifying glass to create the bubble. Move the bubble in a position it won't disturb you. In this case, I'm going to capture alarm clock, start logging, create alarm clock, update alarm clock, delete alarm clock, stop logging, and you'll be taken back to the Tasker. Filter for alarm clock. And those are all the entries we generated from the logcat menu. You can use them now in Tasker. I'm sending the logcat information from Tasker to NodeRED unprocessed. I know you're probably going to ask for the same information to be available via Tasker locally, and I might consider this for the next video, but in this video I'm only going to focus on NodeRED. Since I'm doing all the processing on the NodeRED side, there is no point for Tasker to do anything else other than sending that raw data. Now, initially, when I was investigating the data, I've discovered that Android will assign different IDs to the same alarms, which made troubleshooting this thing really complicated. Now, thankfully, thanks to Jim and his brainstorming session with me, we were able to come to a conclusion how to keep the ID and how to actually track the information about alarms, so you could have multiple alarms, update the multiple alarms, and delete them when needed. So let's start the tutorial. Now you can see those instances in here, and you'll be able to see this is alarm removed, this is alarm updated, etc. But I've copied them for you onto the notepad so you could see them a little bit better. Obviously they're all gonna have your alarm clock up, and they're going to have some text after it. So this is the best combination for you to use for the alarm to create, this is for the alarm to update, and this is for the alarm to remove. And I'm going to use that in my Tasker triggers. So I can cancel this and let's exit it out, because I've got everything ready. Now I'm going to send entire data to NodeRED because there is no point of me processing this in a Tasker. I might talk about Tasker and using that information separately in a different tutorial, but for now it's better to use that CPU power on a computer on NodeRED instead of tasking Tasker with this. So I've created 3 different entries because I want to know what type of entries or what type of logcat entries I'm sending. So if you go to my task, it's very simple. It's a HTTP request post, and I'm using in here the address, and address is thanks to my 2 profiles. So the one is a Tasker available you to use. So that will obscure your information about your server, so you can share your information with internet. And the second one is how I obtain the values for these. I have a separate profile that basically downloads information from my NodeRED server and fills that in the global variables, so I don't have to worry about it. All I have to do is just update the details globally, and that will get served to my Tasker. So let's go back to Tasker itself. And you will see that in this instance I have a body which gonna contain in here. This is the text of the logcat, then the name of the phone, so I could understand which phone I'm using, and type of the text I'm sending. In this case, this is update. So the type of the request in, for example, update, in the type of the request in example for the creating a new alarm, it's create, and obviously the type of request for the removing, it's gonna be remove. So that was very simple, and I'm just sending that. Now the flow itself doesn't look very complicated, but there's a couple of things that I probably have to explain. So first of all, we're gonna start with the component of sending HTTP posts. So I'm sending this to the directory or path alarm, and it depending on what kind of section I'm going to deal with, whether it's a create, update or delete, I'm going to use a different processing of that information, mostly because that information is available in a different form. First, we're going to start with action of creating an alarm. And as you can see, that is the logcat we're going to deal with. There is a new alarm clock instance, and we can basically process this information. Now, to create a new thing, we're going to do a couple of things. First of all, I need alarm ID, which is going to be essential to identify the ID. Now, bear in mind that Android will change the ID, which makes it annoying, and later on we're gonna do something to combat this. Because I also gonna get the time, if you can see in here, there is a time function right there with the date. I can create a time object, and this is very much useful if you're going to convert that into different time zones, or you want to do anything with time at all, because it will give you a time in seconds. So we have a possibility to capture this, and then instead of just passing it as a string, we can convert this into a time object. Lastly, there is a label available. However, the label itself isn't available as a name, unfortunately, for some reason. We only have information about how long it is. So if you want to identify your alarms by something, you can just pick the number of letters that you use for that label. Lastly, I'm going to compose a payload, and bear in mind the enabled, but it is alarm is set or not. It's not actually part of the creating process of that alarm, so I have to hard code this. From my request from the phone, now also setting a phone and which phone has issued the notification. So if you have multiple phones, you can set that too. So let's create an alarm, and I'll show you how this alarm is placed in an array. I'm going to create a single alarm right now and for 10, and you'll see that I've passed the information over and I have my first object in alarms array. So if I'm gonna open, I have an alarm ID, which is how I identify the alarm, and in alarm I'm going to get the following features. I got hours, minutes as an integer, I have a label is not set, and the alarm is enabled through, and I formatted this to a readable form. I also have an alarm time, which is basically passed in here as a string. However, this is an object I can use to extract any information from that I want. Now, once I've got that information, I'm basically, how that information ends up in an array is basically I'm loading it up with variables. So first I'm going to assign the variables that arrive in a payload, and I'm going to process this. Now, if previously that array wasn't really created, so I've used this to create the empty array, and then this is a function to add extra zeros like here in front of the 4. For each phone, I have this script that I'm going to execute, and what this script does is first it looks for the ID. It looks in the array for that ID, and if it's not able to find the ID, it returns -1. Now, remember also that for each phone you have to change the name, so this is where your name goes. So for each, if the alarm isn't found, then I'm okay to actually enter the alarm. Otherwise, I don't want to create a new alarm. And why I'm doing this check is because Android will actually create an alarm from the instance of update. So when we update the alarm and the IDs are all messed up, meaning that some of the IDs are already missing because we dismissed the alarms, Android will try to fill them in and reassign the IDs, which is really annoying. So we're only going to create a new alarm or new instance of the alarm if the ID isn't found. So this function in here basically is going to check for the ID number, in this case 1, and if it's there it will return the index. If it's not there, it will return -1. Then I'm just going to reassign everything I need and push that into an array for one of the positions. Once this is done, I'm simply going to store it in my array back again, and that's pretty much it for all this function. Now, before we're going to move further for this step of displaying it, I'm going to go over the update process. So let's open the update function. Now, first we're going to take a look at the update logcat, and this is the update logcat, and you'll see that we've got two arrays of informations. There is one of the current or previous state and one with the updated state. And this is important because on some instances the ID will change, so the system will override a new ID. So I need to retain the previous ID and the new ID, so I will make sure I can keep track of it. Now, I've been to Hackspace where Jim was helping me to troubleshoot this, and while I had a really complicated regex to actually capture all the information, he helped me out to reduce this with, well, a reduce function. So if that looks slightly complicated to you, what it does, it takes that string from here and converts that into a JSON. So all of that is going to serve us to receive all that nice JSON in here when the alarm has been updated. Then because there are two groups in there, then I can assign this JSON to one previous and one current, which I'm going to use further on. Now, because I had Jim also available, I was able to ask him to actually convert the days instead of a string to an array, which is going to be very handy for use. Let's update my alarm and send that information over so we could see what we are talking about. So I'm going to refresh that context, and I'll have a new instance available, updated with some additional information. So you can see, apart from displaying this, so I could display this on the dashboard itself, which is in here. I have an array which I can easily use to track the days and use it in the system. All other information is really intact, and I preserve the date as well because I might want to use it later. So that's what it does. It basically processes that array and creates that simple statement here, so I can display it. And then, because I'm dealing first with a string, I want to make sure that the values I received, like hours, minutes, etc., they passed as integers, so I could easily use them setting all the alarms. So that's basically the update. And to update the alarm function itself, I'm taking that information and loading it to my arrays. And I'm using the same function to check if the array existed and to add the leading series. And then for each phone, I perform the following set of actions. I test the previous ID first to identify the ID. Now, if there is a change of ID, first of all, I want to find that previous ID. Then I will assign a new ID to that list, and I know that the correct alarm is going to be updated and stored under the new ID. I also add the date and also add the alarm information. So all of that is stored in here, and I'm able to continue to the next step, which means deleting information. Now, if I want to delete a alarm from my array, what I have to do is really have a current ID and the phone that it's been sent from. The phone identification helps me to decide which array I should access, and ID to find the function. So let's pass this information as JSON to delete alarm function. And again, what I'm doing is to checking what is the index with that ID 1. Then once I've got the index, I can just simply delete the element and save the alarm again. That's pretty much it in terms of managing it. Now, to display this, I use some online templates to actually find this table kind of type of table I can display and feed it from an array. Now, I didn't modify the table itself much. I only changed a couple of things. So you'll see stuff like user in here because I wanted, and message options because I wanted to make it as clear as possible to what information has been edited. So in order to send that information to a template node, I need to clean up my code a little bit. So in case I'm gonna have some leftovers or empty arrays, I can clear this with this function in here, and I'm saving this and passing it as a message option. Now, obviously, depending on the phone, I'm gonna send that to a different outcome. So let's take a look at what I'm doing. I have these functions here stored. I have this information here stored, so when I actually pass them over to a template, at the bottom there's a couple of things I need to edit. First of all, user is just something that's been already specified, but you can name it yourself, so it can be your alarm data. And it's stored in obviously message options in here. If you change that to payload, you'll be able to save it in a payload. Then you do the binding for the table. So for each row, you're gonna provide a certain information, and we have for this one we have an alarm and alarm display, and you can see we're going to alarm and we're going to go alarm display. So this is the value we're going to pass. Then we're going to have alarm date, and so on and so on. And those informations are actually go into a table. So you can see I have a table labels in here, and where I have a time, I use alarm display alarm display a value to actually display it. So this is where you enter those things, and this table allows for a sort to happen as well. I didn't modify the sort itself. I only changed the date of the type of the sort, so you have a numeric and alphabetic sorts to correspond with it. However, I don't believe it holds true for the date because it's a little bit more complicated to sort it that way, but for the most part it's there, you can use it, you can play with it. I didn't want to edit it out and delete it. And lastly, I've got two template nodes in here that's just display the alarm icons. That's pretty much everything. I know that was complicated, so I would strongly recommend you again just to click the article and read it at your own pace. Now, there's plenty of things that you can do with this information. You have available hours and minutes, so you can set the custom timers. There are also information about the repeat schedule, so you can see which days also the alarms is repeating itself, and if you use the labels in a clever way, you can actually identify the alarms by the number of characters used in the labels. It's not perfect, and I don't understand why Google didn't do it this way, but well, we have to work with what we've got. Now, I'm for sure going to use that alarm to actually set the curtains, and I'll show you in the future how to do it, how to synchronize the curtains with your alarm clock, and how to schedule it a couple of minutes before it goes off. So that gives you a perfect reason to actually follow me on social media, because I don't have a posting schedule. So when the next content is up, you'll get notification about the article or article in the video as well. So follow me on social media or use the YouTube notification system to stay in touch. And as for now, guys, I'm going to say thanks for watching and see you next video. Take care. Bye.